Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And this evening we're going to talk about Pledge to Amend and related topics. And my guest is Dr. Rick Stagenborg, who is forever coming on the show because he's so darn interesting and so good, and my viewers like you. So that's why we have you coming back again, Rick, to talk about the Pledge to Amend and other things related to that. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great. Thanks for having me.
Are you nervous?
No.
I am. What scares me is that you're a psychiatrist, and I'm just a little lowly psychologist, and we always look up to you guys, even though we protest that we don't.
I wanted to be a psychologist, but I couldn't get in graduate school.
He's going to butter up to me now.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
Yeah. Do you like your business as a psychiatrist?
I'm not practicing right now, but I do. I love psychiatry, psychotherapy mostly.
Yeah. You do private, personal, family, group, all that kind of psychotherapy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I'm practicing.
Yeah. My favorite is group work.
Mine too.
Yeah.
And family-oriented group work.
Let's forget about the topic and talk about psychotherapy.
We could do another show on that, Don. I love being on.
Yeah. So as you know, our show goes in two major segments, typically. The first segment is the bio segment or the personal segment, where I talk to you about who you are personally, so the viewers have an idea who you are, so they know some idea why it is you have the views you have on the things we'll be talking about. And I know we've done this a number of times in the past, but we do have new viewers, and I want them to know a little bit more about you because you're deucedly interesting just who you are, besides following your passion about Move to Amend and those kinds of things. So can we start?
Sure, absolutely.
If I were to ask your best friend of Rick, what would you say about Rick? How would you describe him?
He's honest to a fault.
Honest to a fault. Oh, can I ask you, what does that mean?
Well, I try to answer questions in a straightforward way without being overly concerned about whether the person who asks the question or brings up the issue likes the answer or not. I try to put it in a way that they're most likely to consider what I have to say, but if they're so wrong on an issue and don't want to listen to an alternative point of view, that's not my concern. I still tell it like it is.
Have you been that very careful with me or not?
You're not easily offended, Don. Believe me, I've tried and you didn't even notice.
I didn't notice. It's good to have you here again in my guest chair. Yeah. And when and where were you born?
I was born in 1958 in Portland.
58 in Portland. Why were you born?
Well, Don, you don't want to get into all that. I was born because my parents were Catholic and didn't use birth control. How's
Been
that?
there, done
How's
that.
No, I was a wanted child.
That wasn't fair because usually I give you warning ahead of time. There's one trick question in the entire interview, but before the guy started, I sprung two on you just to unnerve you because you're so calm and not nervous. Anything significant about your cultural heritage that's worth repeating?
Well, my dad is mostly German, and my mom is very proud of her Scots-Irish heritage, and so that's a volatile combination. But I think really the more interesting cultural aspect is my father is a red meat Republican, and my mother was a bleeding heart liberal who practically exsanguinated when Kennedy was shot. So I grew up with both perspectives, and I think that gives me a real valuable ability to look at both sides of a question and consider different points of view respectfully and try to come up with something that makes sense to me, hopefully from both points of view.
You think you can do that fairly well?
I think I'm pretty good at it, yeah.
Yeah. As far as a religious preference, are you still Catholic, or what are you now religiously?
No, I left the church at 10 years old when I discovered they had dogma. I didn't know what dogma was until I gave in to my dad's wishes and started going to Catholic confirmation training. And the penguins would tell us something, and then I'd raise my hand to ask a question. It's like, no, you don't ask questions. You're just supposed to learn it so you can recite it. And that was it for me. I was gone.
The penguins, now I know what that means, but I'm not sure the viewers know. Tell the viewers that the penguins are the nuns. Weren't they sweet?
Everybody saw Blues Brothers. Oh my God, it's a new generation watching. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
One decade fades into the next at our age, Don.
Yeah. We can talk about what we're fading into now, but that'll take another 2 hours anyhow.
We'll get into parts of it.
Anything particularly interesting about your education, other than your education required to become a psychiatrist?
Well, I really loved college, and if somebody would have paid me, I'd probably still be going to college. I love teaching. And I studied the broadest possible background I could get other than the liberal arts. I wasn't so much interested in those. I'm more of a left brain type person for the most part. Excuse me. But I studied, the other thing I didn't like much was economics, and so I found out to my everlasting regret that you really need to understand economics if you want to understand politics, which has always been a passion of mine. So
Politics has always been a passion of yours.
my brother was in Vietnam when I was 10 years old. I was seeing the war on TV, and I was adamantly opposed. And I've always been adamantly opposed to war, even when I joined the Army.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you in the Army?
18 months.
18 months. What'd you do in the Army?
I was a psychiatric resident.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was interesting. One of the things I learned early on was that if a war does break out, psychiatrists are within a couple of miles of the front, because the idea was you don't want to remove the people too far. You want to get them back in as soon as possible. For good reason, actually. People that are pulled out for psychological reasons usually feel tremendously guilty if they don't go back. So, and it's harder the longer you wait. So, studies have shown that's actually better for the soldier, if in combat anyway. But when a soldier wanted out, I went to bat for him, because as far as I was concerned, if they wanted out, that's good enough reason.
What time frame were you in the service?
88 to 89.
And you treated PTSD?
All kinds of stuff. We treated mostly acute psychiatric stuff, mostly severe depression, including psychotic depression, first break, schizophrenia, and mania, which are both pretty common in the military because of the stresses and the age group.
Well, through my practice, I always referred people of that level of unhappiness or sickness or whatever, because I wanted to be successful. And that's a very small percentage, so I didn't deal with heavy duty. I had referrals, and occasionally I would take somebody on of that diagnosis area, and if I thought I could do something with them. But it's a real challenge for a shrink kind of a person to take that kind of a challenge on, because however hard I avoid being that involved with my clients. And because of my makeup, I am involved to some degree, but I'm fortunate in that I manage to have a distance if I see myself getting too involved. I have been successful in doing that. And except for a couple of times when I've had borderline personalities that I didn't recognize earlier on, and one's with a pistol in his belt and he's sweating profusely, and we're talking about how he feels about me. But those are fun stories we can read. You've had some of those.
That's actually my specialty, PTSD and borderline personality disorder. More recently, combat-induced PTSD, because the last job I had was at the VA.
Borderline, that's a challenge. Borderline personality disorders.
That's what makes it fun.
I don't know. Let's continue, all right?
Okay.
We have a partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, one of those.
I'm married.
Uh-huh.
no children at home. I have a daughter who's married, just made me a grandpa, and 3 stepsons, adult stepsons.
You're a grandpa. How does it feel being a grandpa?
I love it. It gives me even more motivation to keep up the fight.
So what's your grandpa, granddaughter, grandson, or what?
Grandson.
How old is he?
He's about 3 months now.
3 months. Oh man, I'm thinking about what it must be like watching him grow, because you have the experience behind you. I'm thinking about how it is. I look at my grandchildren and great-grandchildren now, and even small children anywhere, and they're relating to their parents in the supermarket or whatever. There's a special feeling that's just beyond description. So you're just entering the grandfather stage.
That's right.
And you know what that's about. You have to report back to me next year how it's working for you.
It's great so far. Unfortunately, I can only get up here about once a month these days. So, but last time I saw him, he couldn't smile voluntarily, only reflexively when he farted. So I'm looking forward to him. I'm looking forward to him smiling when he sees me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No one likes this question, but I'd like to ask it because no one likes it. Your political persuasion, your left, right, center, all over the place.
I'm a radical centrist.
Rick's looking through the window. What do you mean radical centrist? There's no such thing.
Yeah, there is. You had a guest on talking about it, actually, and I love the term. I'm a radical centrist in the sense that I believe so strongly in my view of the way politics should work and the kind of society we should have that I piss off liberals and conservatives alike. I think those labels are overused, and for the most part they're defined by the corporate media. And if you accept those labels, then you are limiting yourself. And that's a big reason that Americans can't have democracy. We can't talk to each other and achieve consensus. You can't tell your leaders what you want them to do if you can't achieve consensus. They'll do what they want to do. They'll just use that division. Do what they want to do, serve the corporate interests, and we all get screwed.
What, in your opinion, is a centrist, in a few words? What's a centrist?
I would say I have about as many conservative positions as liberal positions in terms of classical definitions, not the corporate definitions.
Of course, classical definitions, yeah. Oh, we could pursue that.
I'm not at all an ideologue. I am a pragmatist. I'm a principled pragmatist. I have basic values I think that are very similar to yours. But there's a lot of that is conservative values. We don't necessarily label them that way because we use those labels to pit people against each other. But like I said, my dad was very conservative, my mom was very liberal, and I think both positions make sense. It's just a matter of bringing them together in a way that makes sense.
And you didn't turn out schizophrenic with those two extremes in your background?
No, but I do have a borderline split.
Rick, help me with you. Rick's been with me for
multiple
years.
Personalities.
Right. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Do you have any memberships that are worth sharing with the viewers?
Well, I'm on the National Board of Alliance for Democracy.
Alliance for Democracy, great organization. I'm a member, of course, you know.
I belong to a lot of different organizations. Veterans for Peace is probably the one I'm most active in, aside from the Alliance.
What's the Veterans for Peace?
Well, Veterans for Peace is founded in 1985 during the Reagan Wars in Latin America. And they're against all facets of war. I mean, and I agree with that. As I said, I've always been totally anti-war. And I realized, it took me a while to realize I had to study war before I could understand what causes it and have some ideas about how to end it. So now that I understand the question a lot better, I mean, it didn't take me very long, really, getting into my research to realize that war was an obsolete concept. Persian Gulf shocked me. It was so close after Vietnam and the American people were fooled so easy. But I realized that that's almost a whole generation. It seemed like a short time to you and me.
Yeah.
But that's almost a whole generation. They had a whole new generation of kids that didn't know this stuff. They aren't taught it in school. And so that's one of the things that I think we have to do is educate the public. So I started my own nonprofit, Take Back America for the People.
Say that again, Take Back America for the
Take Back
People.
America for the People, right. And originally the website was supposed to be soldiersforpeaceinternational.org. They were sort of two sides of the same coin. Haven't come up with a separate website yet, and I think I can probably still get away with that. So if people check out soldiersforpeaceinternational.org, they will also find the information about Pledge to Amend campaign, which we'll be talking about presently.
Yes. War. There's an alternative to war.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Peace.
Okay. How do you avoid war? I'm not going to let you get into that.
Well, first you have peace begins within, really, literally, each of us. But we have to be motivated to fight against the causes of war nonviolently, because otherwise we'll lose that fight. But first we have to have the first jihad, which is the struggle within ourselves. So a lot of Muslims will use that term, the first jihad. And you have to really have control of yourself and understand your motivations have to be pure. If you're acting out of anger, I don't care what anybody says. A lot of people say, oh, you have to get angry, you can channel that. No, I disagree. I think when you're really angry, you're not thinking straight. You know what you want, you know what you're against, but you're not thinking straight about how to get there, because you're splitting between you, us, and them, when we're really one people, and we're not going to have peace until we understand that. That's really the basic principle.
But the functioning of nations does not depend upon an individual's orientation, as you're talking about, and how they look at war and peace. We have a collection of human beings. How do you deal with a collection of human beings that decide to go to war?
Well, I don't want to. First of all, the average human beings don't decide the war. It's the politicians who serve the corporate puppet masters who make those decisions, and frequently they're very unpopular. The way they do it in the United States is they manufacture consent, and there have been really good books written about this. I've interviewed some of their authors on my radio show, SFPI Radio, which you can find on my website, the links to that. But it's not the people that decide. The people follow the decisions of the leaders who create these situations where it appears that war is justified. But now that they're finding all kinds of excuses, this nonsense about the responsibility to protect, it's nothing but an excuse for going in and picking sides in a civil war, knowing that if one side wins, they'll work with you afterward. That's why we go in and create these civil wars. CIA funding one side or the other. They're using Al-Qaeda in Syria just like they did in Libya. And yet you see people, especially partisan Democrats, saying, oh, well, if Obama's doing it, it must be okay.
When you say we, you're talking about the administration or our government.
Yes, right, absolutely, because again, it's the government that makes the decision that people follow. And hopefully they'll someday realize we have the power to tell our government no. We have the power to stop wars. But the key, I think, is to reach out internationally, let people in other countries know that, help them in their struggles, and start an international grassroots movement. And that's really what Soldiers for Peace International is.
Like Amnesty International?
No. Amnesty International is selective about who they target, and some people think that they're they're careful about who they target because their funding isn't independent of special interests.
The funding isn't independent of special interests for Amnesty International?
That's what I'm told. I haven't studied it in detail. Christoph Lehmann is a Danish psychologist who's been doing a lot of research in this, and I've read some of his stuff. And I'm not going to start naming names because I don't remember all the details.
Sure.
But a lot of the NGOs that have UN sponsorship are funded by George Soros.
Non-government organizations, NGOs,
Right.
Yeah.
Are funded by George Soros. And if you know about, yeah, a lot of money, a lot of business interests, a lot of financial interests in particular. That is the financial industry. So it's suspect. And I think it's really interesting that people on the right identify him as some super liberal. He's not a super liberal. You don't get that rich without being self-interested. You know, he says some populist things, but that doesn't mean he's a everyday Joe. and it doesn't mean that he's not acting in his own self-interest when he funds some of these NGOs.
And his self-interest is so big and so huge, and
He's a
his
multi-billionaire.
need
Yeah.
is probably, it interferes with his capacity for empathy and caring for fellow human beings. That's somewhere down the line. And
I don't want to make any assumptions about that either, because he does say things that make him sound like a decent person. I don't think he's evil. I don't think anybody's evil, but people do certainly do evil things.
so you said you're not working as a psychiatrist lately. How long has it been you've not worked full-time as a psychiatrist?
Well, I resigned in March of 2010 from the VA to run for the U.S. Senate, and I haven't been back to work since. Well, I worked for a few months at a nonprofit clinic before I ran full-time, and haven't been back to work since.
How do you keep bread on the table?
I don't. My wife does.
I can't trip you up no matter what I ask you.
Well, I have a small disability pension, so I can help a little, but it barely covers my own expenses.
So what have you been doing other than campaigning for the U.S. Senate and being involved in political movements?
Well, mostly the Pledge to Amend campaign, actually working for electoral reform through constitutional amendment.
Mm-hmm. I ask you a few more questions before we take a break, and then we'll go into the meat of the program. Okay.
Sure.
How do you see the mainstream media, left, right, or centrist?
Corporate.
Corporate.
No, those terms are meaningless,
Yeah,
left,
yeah.
right, because they're defined by the corporate media. It's a
Do you-
tautology.
Do you read or listen to alternative media?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
Give me a couple of names.
Global Research News on the web. Just Foreign Policy, although I'm finding more sophisticated sources than that. It's a good place to start, though, if you don't understand.
Just Foreign Policy, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. But definitely Global Research News and, oh darn, Christoph would kill me if I couldn't remember the name. Google Christoph Lehman, spelled Christ of Lehman, L-E-H-M-A-N-N. He writes for 2 different websites, and I'm blanking on them both right now. But he's really good.
So, what's most important nowadays for Americans to spend their energy and time on? The move to amend, or there's something more important, and this is secondary?
Well, I don't like saying move to amend, because that's a specific organization. There's a movement to amend the Constitution, and they are not the entire movement, although they represent themselves sometimes that way. And a lot of people assume they are, because they're really out there doing good work. But I have some differences with the way they're structured and their approach, and we can get into that in the second half.
Yeah.
So please don't say move to amend when you mean movement to amend the Constitution.
Thank you.
They are not the movement.
Now that's sunk in. It wasn't quite there yet. Movement to amend.
Right.
Thank you. That's important.
Sure.
Yeah. What's right with America today?
Well, what's right is the people are still basically decent people. When you see people being abused all the time, you see injustice all around you, you come to sort of accept that that's the way it is. Some people do. You and I don't. But, you know, you grow up, you're taught by your parents certain things, and when you see, if your parents teach you, well, people are basically evil, and then you see all this injustice and violence and anger around you, then that sort of confirms that, and you don't question it. But if you believe that people are basically good, but they can be perverted by other people's actions, and that they can change, then you see the world in a different way. And being a psychotherapist like you are, I know people can change. And what I'm trying to do is encourage people to change, because the way the average American is right now, human society cannot survive unless Americans change. We have to change the collective consciousness of America and the world, but especially America.
So my next question is, I think you've started answering, what's wrong with America today?
What's wrong is that the rich and powerful have the means now to control the mass media for the most part. They have the means to make sure that the interests of the rich and corporations are represented in Congress and the White House over the interests of we the people. And people have, either through cynicism or a sense of helplessness or apathy, people have forgotten that we created this country and it's supposed to be our job to run it. And if they don't have a sense of urgency about the fact that civilization is on the verge of collapse, or if they don't know that's true, then they have a responsibility to figure that out. As scary as it is, just global warming alone, we know is going to cause millions of deaths, no matter what we do right now. How much longer can we wait? But we can't just go out and say, we're with Bill McKibben, you know. We support what he said, whatever he says, or even get on the street protesting that. It doesn't make any difference. We need to change the composition of Congress. We can't give up on the political process like a lot of people in Occupy want us to do. Mm-hmm. We have to change the political process, and that's why the constitutional amendment movement is so important.
The constitutional amendment movement to change the process.
You'll understand better when I explain move to amend.
Okay, all right. It seems to me you're looking at what some suggest is human nature, and this is why humans are doing to fellow humans what they're doing. But
they've been conditioned by the mass media, by politicians, by their own parents.
You're just jealous because you're not rich like they are.
No, I could have been rich a long time ago if that's what I thought was important.
I bet you could. So let's take a break before my director yells at us. And then we'll come back and talk some more about the subject of the show, the pledge to amend. Okay, we're back, and I know you came back because you want to hear what Rick's got, what else he's got to say. It's so interesting, isn't he? So, for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. And tonight, Dr. Rick Stagenborg and I are going to talk about the movement to, or the Pledge to Amend campaign, the Pledge to Amend campaign, the movement to amend the Constitution as compared to Move to Amend, which is a different organization. We'll talk about that some more. So I have some questions to ask you. Shall I start by asking you some questions, or will you start off our discussion now?
You can ask questions if you want.
All right.
Give me time to think.
You're always thinking. Electoral reform by constitutional amendment. What does that mean, electoral reform by constitutional amendment?
I'm glad you asked me that, Don. Well, there's a lot of confusion about why we need a constitutional amendment and what it should accomplish. There's a very popular phrase, abolish corporate personhood. And there's resolutions being passed around the country calling for a constitutional amendment to abolish corporate person.
Yes.
In fact, that's one of the proposals in some of the amendments that have been introduced in Congress. The problem is that most people think, partly because of Thom Hartmann's work, partly because of Move to Amend's use of the slogan, that if we abolish corporate personhood, we will reform the electoral process, because they think Citizens United was based on the idea that corporations are people, therefore they can contribute to campaigns and you can't limit their free speech.
Will you say a few words about Citizens United for people who are kind of green and...
Sure. Citizens United, I'm not going to go into detail.
Sure,
but
just generally.
The decision, what it did was the Supreme Court said that you could not limit the ability of the listener to hear whatever propaganda corporations and rich individuals could afford to fund. They said that was an infringement on free speech. So that's where the call for money is not speech comes in, and that's a part of the Move to Amend proposed amendment, and it's implicit, at least, in some of the other amendments that have been introduced in Congress. But that raises a whole issue about freedom of speech.
And the Supreme Court rendered a decision that said it's okay for corporations and the super rich to spend all the money they want in the electoral process.
Right, but they did not say that the corporations had speech rights. They said that the listener had the right to hear it. It's different. So even if corporations aren't people, they can still do this because people have the right to listen to propaganda if somebody can afford to put it out there. And of course, the only ones that can afford to put it out there are the rich and the corporations that make them rich.
Well, don't the rich consider spending money a form of speech?
Yes, they do, but fortunately, they're only 1% of the population. The super rich that can, like Sheldon Adelson, buy presidential elections. But that drowns out the voices of the rest of us that don't have that means. So for the purposes of elections, or influencing elections, money is not speech. That's something I think most reasonable people could agree on. Although I know a Democratic Party officer who disagrees. It just shows you the kind of wild divergence of opinions people get when they get stuck on certain ideas. If you accept that money is speech, it's a form of expression, and you should never restrict that, then I could understand that position. But everybody knows you can't yell fire in a crowded theater because it's dangerous. Well, how dangerous is it to allow the rich and corporations to buy elections? That's dangerous.
How do we stop them from buying elections?
Constitutional amendment.
What's this constitutional amendment going to say?
Well, different people have different ideas, and I think that's a real strategic mistake to write an amendment and then try to get everybody behind it, because there's so many different amendments out there, and it's really splitting the movement to amend the Constitution. Move to Amend is a sterling example. They are a group of roughly 6 people who call themselves the steering committee of this nonprofit. And what they have a very clever strategy. They got different groups to endorse them, and they claim to represent them. But the thing is, other than sort of some superficial back and forth, they make the decisions at the top. It's a very hierarchical organization. I said earlier I have a problem with with their structure. People often don't know what they're signing on to, and yet now they run around saying they represent hundreds of thousands of people in hundreds of groups. I think if those groups knew the problems with the amendment they proposed and the very strategy of trying to push specific wording of an amendment, and the fact that that they know we have to make this a campaign issue, but they chose not to do it in 2012, they might not be so enthusiastic about calling them the leaders of the movement.
Well, then, if that isn't a good idea, the move to amend in order to amend the Constitution, what is another approach to doing something about the Citizens United decision in amending the Constitution?
Well, I don't want to be too critical of the move to amend proposal. I think it's one of the best ones out there. I just think we can do better, but they're not willing to listen to anybody that disagrees. So that's the danger of putting certain people in positions where they speak for tons and tons of people who they've never talked to. So that's why I think the Occupy model makes a lot more sense. And I'm encouraging people to really think about what they could do if they want to be part of the getting resolutions passed and referenda like Move to Amend is calling for, it doesn't have to be exactly what Move to Amend is calling for. You can call for something stronger. You can say ban corporate contributions. The Move to Amend one doesn't say that. You can avoid the use of the term free speech and avoid those arguments, which even some liberals, people who call themselves liberal, can't understand or don't want to understand. Just leave free speech out of it. If you ban corporate contributions and you give Congress the power to regulate individual contributions, and when I say contributions, I mean direct and indirect through super PACs and whatnot, and PACs. If you ban the corporate contributions and give Congress the power to limit individual contributions, you are effectively saying money is not speech. But you didn't say it you didn't say it in a way that's going to spark an argument. So I think that's a better approach, but
Your
again...
thinking is dangerous. It's beautiful. I love it.
Oh my God, I thought I turned my phone off.
Ooh, I thought I was losing it.
I'll fix that. Yeah, no, that's it. We are in the twilight zone right now. Outer limits. It's my theremin going off. Okay. I can talk and turn my phone off at the same time.
Of course you can. I'm glad it was you and not me. It has been me in the past, you know.
We've all done it, I think.
Sure.
But anyway, so there are different approaches, and I think we need to support different approaches. I think to try to put yourself at the head of a mass movement and say, we're going to do it this way, it's our way or the highway, I think is a problem. And it's a problem that we've had on the left forever. We have some very prominent groups and individuals who've made careers out of promoting their own ideas. And they start 501c3s, they compete for money and attention instead of putting the cause first. They always have that self-interest in mind.
501c3, say what that is in other words.
That's a non-profit corporation.
Okay.
That's the most strictly regulated. They're supposed to be public interest, you know, like Citizens United. Citizens United actually was founded as a public interest nonprofit, which is one of the problems with Sanders' amendment. A lot of people say, oh, we have to support Senator Sanders' amendment.
Senator Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, including Tom Hartman. He's got 3 million listeners and viewers every day. But they don't question it. They don't say, Bernie, why are you exempting nonprofits when Citizens United was a nonprofit? Why are you exempting unions when you need conservative support to get it passed? Unions are corporations too.
What do you think of Bernie Sanders overall?
Love him. He's one of our best senators, right up there with Merkley.
Electoral reform by constitutional amendment. So what's the constitutional amendment you're thinking about that's going to facilitate or require electoral reform? What do you mean by electoral reform?
Well, to prevent rich people and corporations from influencing elections. That's the goal. And again, abolishing corporate personhood is important, but it's a separate issue. And I think a constitutional amendment should do both. It should abolish corporate personhood, ban corporate campaign expenditures, give Congress the power to limit individual campaign expenditures. And personally, I think it should also have a mechanism for preventing corporations from buying senators by promising, or members of Congress by promising them or their staff great jobs in the private sector that they're supposed to be regulating, in the industries they're supposed to be regulating. So I wrote a version that would do that also, and people can find it on the website of Soldiers for Peace International under comparison of amendments.
Soldiers for Peace International.
.org.
Man, your mind is something else. So that's how we reform the electoral system, by what you just said.
Right. And just to clarify, I said I don't think people should be pushing their own amendments. What I think we should be doing is engaging in a dialogue about what the amendment should have in it. And so that's what Pledge to Amend campaign is all about. So even though I think we should include a provision to close the revolving door, it's yet another issue, and the more complicated you make the amendment, the more argument you get. So I haven't really pushed that because I've found a lot of people want to argue about that point. If Congress gets serious about passing an amendment, and they might, since Obama said he would support one, and Warren said that corporations are not people, and there's already a dozen amendments on the floor, or not on the floor, but that have been introduced on the floor, then I think we are making a difference. I think Move to Amend was absolutely wrong when they said that the people aren't ready yet. The people are ready, and had we made this a campaign issue in 2012, then I think that people would be ready in 2014 to make it a litmus test for every candidate for Congress.
Well, okay, what are you going to do with the tons of money that they will put out there for the ordinary citizens to be conditioned or brainwashed to resist this kind of idea that you're putting out there that will allow them to speak for themselves and have people in the government speaking for them? How are you going to get the money out of the politics? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
That's the importance of making it a campaign issue. There are people in a lot of states don't have any decent choices to vote for. Everybody complains about it. You vote for Tweedledum or Tweedledummer. You vote for the Democrat or the Republican. They're both corporate candidates. So people quit voting, or they vote for third-party candidates whose parties don't really even promote them, let alone the corporate media ignoring them. And I mean, I had that experience. I got no help from either of the third parties I ran for to speak of. No organized help, certainly. So if we really want this to pass, we need to make it a nonpartisan issue. And being that I'm promoting it through a nonprofit, it has to be nonpartisan. The way I do it has to be nonpartisan. So what I encourage people to do is go out to campaign events, and when there's a question and answer period, say, Congressman or the challenger, would you support a constitutional amendment to abolish corporate personhood, ban corporate campaign expenditures, and limit individual campaign expenditures? Yes or no? Put them on the spot in public. See what they say. If you can get some Democrats with all their advantages, or Republicans with all their advantages, to say, damn right I will, and they've said it in public, then you move on to the next one. You only have to elect a few and take out people who have all the advantages of money. And it's been done. It's been done more than once. But we need to do it systematically. We need to make it a litmus test. Once we take enough of them out, the other ones will fall into line because they'll know they're next.
How do we do it systematically?
If you, what my suggestion was to Alliance for Democracy and to Move to Amend and to a lot of other groups was, why don't we just call for people to do that? We all have national networks. We're all working on the same issue. Why can't we just ask them to ask the candidates? There's nothing illegal about it. You can be a 501c3 and do that. I asked my lawyer. It's not electioneering. It's nonpartisan. You're not supporting a particular candidate, and we're not supporting specific legislation, because this is a hypothetical amendment.
It seems like there are at least a few organizations who are doing just that, what you're talking about now. I don't remember.
Not really.
Not really, huh?
Not exactly. There's a number of organizations that are calling for platforms that they have to pledge to. This is much simpler. It's not 16 different issues that they all have to agree with your position on.
Didn't the Republican do this for the Republican Party?
Don, you're so good at saying what everybody else says. No, I'm just kidding. But a lot of people say that. Oh, no, the Norquist pledge. I'm not doing pledges. And I've had that response from a number of candidates I've approached. And I say, are you taking positions? Because all I'm asking you to do is take a position. I didn't write a pledge. You can say yes or no, but if you don't think that this is important enough where you can stand by a promise to do this, then I'm going to find somebody who can. And
so you're not talking about a pledge, you're talking about a commitment.
Well, I call it making a pledge rather than taking a pledge. They write it, but it has to meet those conditions. Basically, well, it has to meet those three conditions. If they make a pledge to support some kind of amendment that will do those three things, as far as I'm concerned, they've made a pledge, and that's good enough. And I'm not going to pin them down to wording or anything else.
And in the next election cycle, and I'm challenging you now, the next election cycle, there'll be tons of money coming in to defeat these guys. If it becomes public that they've taken the kind of a pledge you're talking about, or the kind of commitment you're talking about.
That's why we need to have a lot of people do it at once. We have senators in, Senator Merkley is working with a group of senators looking at different kinds of amendments.
That's our Oregon senator.
Right.
Is he a good man?
He's one of the best. He's the only one who's talked to me personally about this. That's actually in office. I've approached a lot of other candidates who have talked to me about it, and hopefully they will take this seriously. I talked to Susan Bonamici. She didn't never get back to me. I talked to Carol Shea Porter, who's wonderful. She runs without corporate money.
And those two people are in Portland government?
No, Susan Bonamici's House District 1, running for representative in November from Oregon's House District 1. Also, Joyce Seegers in Oregon's House District 2 has made a pledge.
This is Oregon state government?
No, U.S. House.
Okay.
These are two representatives in Oregon. One made the pledge, the other one didn't. One's corporate backed, the other one is supported by the party, but it's considered a loser race. But she wants to make this an issue. And I'm saying, if challengers make it an issue and if the people get behind them, they can win despite the money. Write letters to the editor, make everybody aware of it, even if the corporate media isn't going to give you opportunities if you're a third-party candidate, say. You still can influence the outcome of the election eventually. Maybe not every, definitely not every election, but you can influence the outcome of some elections. Tilt it, so maybe somebody who wasn't expected to win does win. And I don't care which party they're from because both parties are sold out, but major parties are sold out. So seriously, if you want to change politics, you got to quit thinking in terms of the two-party box. If you find a Democrat or a Republican who supports it, great, support them. Like I said, it's nonpartisan. And both the people I just mentioned are Democrats. I only mentioned two Democrats because I haven't got a Republican to agree to this yet. Although one of the constitutional amendments in Congress right now was introduced jointly by a Republican and a Democrat, which is interesting, little known fact. It's something that should appeal to a true conservative as well as any liberal. Everybody knows Congress is corrupt. That's why they have a 10, 11-point approval rating for years now. They know it's corrupt, but they never connect the dots. Everybody hated Citizens United. 80% of self-identified conservatives and liberals were opposed to Citizens United. And everybody's opposed to corruption, well, except the people that get rich off it. Is that hard to connect, those two things?
That's free enterprise, not corruption. This is democracy.
It's the best democracy money can buy.
So, I'm going to ask you an impossible question. If there's any success, a reasonable amount of success in the approach you're taking, when will we see some results? That's an impossible question, but it's going to take...
Well, it is an impossible question, but let me put it this way. If Move to Amend got behind it this year in a presidential election year instead of waiting until 2014, I think we could have had candidates running in every single congressional district who've made a pledge. Now, we're starting in 2014 because they refused to cooperate for whatever reason. And so I don't know how long it'll take. The longer we wait, the more Citizens United is going to fade from memory. The more, if they think it's going to take a generation, then we need to start on the new generation by that time. No, we have to do it as quickly as possible. So I'm not very happy that they chose to wait 2 years.
Why do we have to do it as quickly as possible?
Well, let me go back to the one of my closing statements in the first segment. Global climate instability. How much time do we have? We already know that millions of people are going to die as a result of our failure to act up until now, no matter what we do. And how many more will die if it takes 2 more years to get control of Congress, or if that delay costs us an extra year on top of that or 2? How many more people will die by the time catastrophe hits if it takes us 4 more years to get it done? I think it's immoral to delay. People have to have a sense of urgency. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about the fact that global climate change could spark mass famine, pandemic. Our water supplies are being contaminated. I forget the figure, something like 40–50% of the world doesn't have access to clean water.
There are a few people who I respect hugely who suggest it may be too late.
Well, if it is, then I guess it doesn't matter. We're just delaying the inevitable if that's the case. I don't think it's too late. And because we don't know, I think it's a moral imperative that we try as hard as we can. And I mean in every way. I talked about writing letters to the editor. That's not a small thing. The more letters to the editor people read that force them to confront the truth. Even if they don't accept it when they read it, you put in the germ of the idea in their mind. You know as a psychotherapist that people don't usually accept what you say right away if it's something that challenges their preconceptions.
Yeah.
But if you repeat it every time you see them, every week, 6 months later they're going to walk in and say, "Hey, Doc, I just had this great idea. We should pass a constitutional amendment. Damn, I'm so smart."
Yeah.
So you're planting the seeds, and again, I think it's important that we do it with a sense of urgency. One of the problems with the left is that they think that facts are enough, and obviously the right wing and the corporate media have taught us that's not true.
And George Lakoff.
And Democratic politicians. They know how to put things so they sound great, but really we're moving steadily towards oblivion, the destruction of human civilization. The planet will survive. Some people talk about the destruction of the planet. No, the planet will survive. They'll shake us off like a virus, which we kind of are. And the planet will go on. Earth will abide, but and so will remnants of human civilization. But what will that look like?
Will the American superpower be diminished in its importance, and there'll be a replacement superpower before this thing we're talking about now, the end occurs?
No, there's only one superpower, and it's not the U.S. It's the multinational corporations that control the U.S. government and are gradually taking over the world.
So it doesn't matter if the nation states anymore are superseded by the super wealthy of the world.
Well, Russia knows that and China knows that's what they're trying to do. What we need to do is make the American people know that, and let the people in the Mideast and Latin America know that we support their efforts of freedom, genuine efforts, not what the corporate media tells us are genuine efforts, like the Free Syrian Army, which is Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, and a bunch of other mercenaries who are acting in their own self-interest, because they want to be a part. They want to have a power broker in the New World Order. These humanitarian interventions are not to protect the people, they're to protect the corporate interests, the multinational corporations that control the U.S. government.
Can we have a radical enough change without violence? Empires I don't know if they ever diminish or give up their power on their own initiative. It's always taken from them.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be by force. The only reason that the international corporate terrorists, I call them,
Corporate terrorists.
Corporate terrorists.
Corporate terrorists.
The only reason they have this power is because they control the U.S. government. What if we decide that we are going to, together, conservatives and liberals and independents, radicals, all decide that together we're going to take back our government? And
you're talking about real liberals and real conservatives in the old
yes.
generic sense of what that meant.
Right. Well, and people,
30 years ago.
Well, and people that think of themselves as liberals and conservatives but don't understand the terms. If we can educate them, look, these are the classic definitions, and look how much we have in common. How did we fight the American Revolution? They had conservatives and liberals then. The extreme conservatives were the Tories. But there were a lot of conservative people that didn't want to break with the crown that ultimately were convinced they had to. And there were enough of them that we succeeded. We can do it again.
Oh, man, the time is running out on us again now. And I want you to have a final word to the viewers, Rick, based on what we've talked about so far, and that would be useful for them in what you're involved in, and what I think is a commendable, a terrifically important thing to talk about. So talk to the viewers, the message for them.
Well, I hope that you'll go to the website of soldiersforpeaceinternational.org and check out the Pledge to Amend campaign. Look at my critique of the various amendments and my suggested alternative. And become involved with the Pledge to Amend campaign. Write letters to the editor, challenge elected officials and their challengers, all the candidates, to take this pledge, particularly at the national level, but also at the state level, because once we get an amendment passed in Congress, it has to be ratified by the state legislatures. So get involved. We don't have that much time. It's nothing to be afraid of. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, and fear is not particularly helpful.
And we don't have that much time right now because they're going to yell at me. Let's talk about a few public service announcements. Okay, let's get to my local broadcast schedule and click on present day activities to get the local broadcast schedule. And to watch my show on the web, go to my website, donbayham.com, and click on favorite links. There's a lot of shows on there. I've got to tell you about the American Civil Liberties Union because our civil liberties are fast diminishing. The ACLU is a wonderful organization, been around for many, many years. Go to that website, talk about the ACLU. And to get Dr. Don's shows broadcast by other stations in other parts of the country, ask your local public access station in the area where you're watching this show to go to www.pegmedia.org and learn how you can have your local station broadcast my shows. And the uncorporate person who said, yes, we got to end it, go to www.movetoamend.org and learn how to end corporate personhood. Thanks for watching. Thanks so much for watching. And thank you for coming on, Rick.
Thanks.
Remember KFC, okay? Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. And my control room. And Rick. Thanks again. Good night.